Welcome to the Weekly Juice Podcast, where we discuss all things real estate, personal finance, investing, entrepreneurship, and the many ways to achieve financial independence. We interview accomplished investors and entrepreneurs with the goal that their stories inspire you to take control of your financial future. Here to get your creative juices flowing while also documenting their own personal investing journeys are your hosts, Corey Jacobson and Ryan Bevilacqua.
Welcome back to the Weekly Juice. As always, it's your boys Ryan and Corey here with another episode for you. Today, it's just us. We were actually approached by a podcast company that wanted to ask how we got to the level we have with our podcast, and basically wanted us to take them from inception to where we are today in growth and tactics and how we leverage our Instagram. So this is actually going to be aired on their show, which is coming up in the future. But we figured we get you guys actually access to it early on. And just a lot of people have been asking, hey, what's an update on your journey? And hey, how do you start a podcast? Or how did you guys grow your show from 0 to an average of 10,000 downloads per month? And it's kind of gone up and down, and we've had a lot of trials and tribulations, but a lot of success along the way too. And this episode is really geared towards answering some questions that we were asked and candidly explaining how we've scaled the show to where it's at, our future goals with it, how it parlays into our portfolio and our, I guess, investing world, and then also our partnership.
We wanted to do this because it's a good insight into why even do a podcast or why even build a social media brand. It's not just to do that aspect of it. It's given us some outside viewers entryway into our life and our business and credibility, and you know some of the things that we do on a daily basis, which gives you kind of like we've said virtual resume, but that's really what it is. And so this episode, we explain the kind of the inception, why, the how to, and then, like you said, the future goals. I think it's we're nowhere near where we want to be, but that's the fun part, right? If we were where we want to be, we probably wouldn't be doing the podcast anymore. So that's kind of the reason for this. It's a shorter episode, but I think people will take to it because we get DMs all the time like, hey, what equipment should I buy? Hey, what, I don't know if we go full into detail on that, but if you want to listen to the episode and you want to ask further detailed questions, we're happy to answer them via DM on Instagram.
Totally. I think that's great. It was more, I think it's more tactful in like some systems that we put in place and like how we riff off each other and what lane each person takes. But yeah, as Corey mentioned, drop us a DM this is more, I wouldn't say top level, but it's a peek behind the curtain on how we run the show, why we run the show, and I guess
how it could benefit you trying to run your own. We know a bunch of people that have started podcasts, right? The consistency is key, and we talk about it in the episode. I don't need to give it away, but a little short one from us today.
Yeah, think about how many people start a podcast, but they don't continue, and this is to show how you can stay consistent on a regular basis, even on the days that you don't want to.
Yep.
But yeah. Without further ado, let's bring in
ourselves.
When you have investment properties and tenants, you need a good system in place for collecting rent to make it easy as possible. And RentRedi can help you with everything. When you sign up for RentRedi, you can start adding your properties, inviting tenants, and creating charges. You can even set up automatic rent reminders and create auto late fees as well. For tenants, they can pay via ACH, card, or even cash using RentRedi's web and mobile apps. They can also use an automatic payment setup and sign up for rent reporting so they get rewarded for paying rent on time. RentRedi saves you time and hassle by automating rent collection, and you can manage everything from one dashboard. For our Weekly Juice listeners, RentRedi's given us a special 50% off for any RentRedi plan using our code WeeklyJuice at rentredi.com. That's RentRedi.com using the code WeeklyJuice. That's WeeklyJuice to save 50% off any RentRedi plan.
Hi, this is Ryan Bevilacqua alongside Corey Jacobson. We are the hosts of the Weekly Juice podcast, which is a show where we interview successful real estate investors and entrepreneurs, and we talk about what it means to reach financial independence or financial freedom through real estate investing. We have roughly 10,000 downloads per month on our show, and we've been doing our podcast for close to 4 years now. Yep. We're on episode 198.
198, yep, 4 years in April.
So our show has opened a lot of different doors for us. We originally started this at the beginning of the pandemic, and we were at that point aspiring real estate investors. We had no properties of our own, and we just wanted to talk about our future or how we wanted to get into real estate investing, how we had at that time put our financial house in order a little bit and kind of got ourselves organized and be ready to invest, I guess is really what we're doing. So, and then Corey came up with the idea to start a podcast just to talk about this and put our aspirations into the universe. And, fast forward, it's led to us interviewing loads and loads of real estate investors around the world. And some of the people that it's opened doors for us to chat with are people that we've read books about and have authored the books that we've studied to become real estate investors. And so we've had a lot of different partnerships and opportunities open up.
Yeah, one of the things we wanted to do was create an organic way to network with other people that be the dumbest person in the room, so to speak. And we felt the best way to do that was to highlight other people on our platform, right? And we felt that one of the other reasons for starting the podcast was because we had a lot of the podcasts out there are people kind of teaching or preaching down, so to speak, of I've created this great legacy for myself, or I've done all this, and this is how you can learn from me. When in reality, we wanted to show people, hey, what's the journey look like alongside us? We're growing with you. We're in this journey together. I think people will be more interested in listening to the trials and tribulations, the good, the bad, and the ugly of trying to build it, and not like, oh, I've already made it. This is what I did 10 years ago, and I'm teaching back down to you. So that was kind of one of the inception thoughts in wanting to start the podcast.
So let's start here. When did you know it was time to go all in on your podcast, full time, quit your job? Or if you haven't, when will you? So for us, we have not gone full time into podcasting. As I mentioned, it's opened a lot of doors for us, and it's opened a lot of other businesses. I should say, like Corey and I have formed joint venture partnerships with guests that have been on the show, but then he and I have also created a few other businesses throughout this. We've built additional streams of income, and the podcast has, while it's not, we generate, a decent clip from one big sponsor that we have that sponsors our show. Shout out to Rent Ready. They're an awesome property management, I guess, if you want to call them like an app or a system that helps you, if you're a small time real estate investor, manage a couple of your properties through an app. And they do rent collection, tenant screening, pretty much like overall management on the back end systems. It's software. So that's one of our sponsors that carries, a decent clip of our revenue. But other than that, it's all through partnerships we formed, and we've been into, investing in real estate deals with other people strictly from meeting them on the show and then taking the relationship offline and into the real world. One
of the ways that we realized that we had something to go off of, and when you say go all in, realize that 4 years later we've released an episode every single week, was when Chad Carson decided to give us a shot and come on our podcast. Somebody that we've read his book, we've looked up to him. He's taught us a lot inadvertently. We hadn't even met him yet, but we created like this brand on social media, and we just felt like, hey, we're going to reach out to people, and if they want to come on, they want to come on. And a lot of times, real estate investors, entrepreneurs, someone that has a story to tell or something to sell, wants to come on, and who knows if they're trying to sell high ticket items, it might only take one or two people that are listening to your podcast for them to jump into their community or buy their product or service, or become a part of their mastermind. So once Chad came on, we felt like we were validated enough. This was like 20 episodes in to say, okay, people want to listen to us. Like evidently someone who's made it, so to speak, gave us a shot. So that was it.
Totally. And to answer the question, just to put a bow on it, I don't know that we'll ever go full-time on the podcast, if you will. We might become full-time real estate investors. This will always be a tool in our arsenal to use as a marketing piece or a marketing platform, but also for us to connect with people organically. It's harder to fly across the country and chat with a real estate investor in California, but it's easy to hop on a Zoom and showcase their show or their story on our podcast. So we'll always use it as an organic networking tool. I don't know that this will become a full-time thing for us where it's like a big massive show and Ryan and Corey are selling their naming rights to a big company. That could be down the line. We're not ruling it out, but that's not our vision with it day one. And so number two is talking about our biggest failure. So what is your biggest failure along the journey of growing your show to the current state, and how have you responded to it?
That's a good question. Our biggest failures, I don't know if it's a failure. I would just say imposter syndrome, like getting over the imposter syndrome of being like, I'm not good enough to do this. I'm not good enough to tell this story. I don't have, $50 million in a bank account. I mean, why would people want to listen to me? I don't know if that would be considered a failure, but that would be the biggest hurdle that I think we had to get over to realize that no, people want to listen to us because we're I like to think we're genuine. I like to think we have really good intentions. We have integrity, and we really want to spread whatever knowledge we have to give to people that maybe just a couple steps behind us. And also, for us to try to learn from people who are ahead of us.
Yeah, I think some speed bumps along the way. Just I don't know if we want to call these failures at all. I think it's really just roadblocks that we had, and we had how to overcome them, as Corey mentioned, is like in the beginning, really getting systematized. There's a couple of us, Corey and I host the show, but we also have a producer who's one of our good buddies who has to run the back end. And then we also parlay this into social media content. So it's like, how do we overcome those things and have dealing with still managing our W-2 jobs while also being real estate investors on the side and then hosting the podcast? Like, how do you systematize your business and your life? So really getting organized and researching systems, asking other people that we've had on the show, what systems have you used to become more efficient? So over time, we've become a lot more efficient with our time. And I think that's helped us to grow and scale the show. But another thing that Corey has mentioned, we actually were on a podcast today, and he mentioned this, like one of the number one things is staying consistent. Like we know every single Wednesday, without fail, we are going to release an episode. Some weeks it's hard to get on a recording schedule, and he and I get together. So one of us will take the reins and record by ourselves just so we don't miss a date, because our listeners are always looking forward to that Wednesday. And it's also a mental thing for us. It's like if you don't let yourself miss out on something, you're just building that muscle and training that muscle over time to just continue to stay consistent. And I think there was a stat you mentioned about something about, maybe, I don't know if it was you or the gentleman we had on the show, like you need to stay in the game for 10 years. Like give yourself a 10-year time horizon and you will become successful if you just don't stop.
Yep, exactly.
And obviously you don't want to put out the same content every single time. What we've learned is I think you can come and hit a vortex of like, I'm doing the same type of episodes every time, talking about the same content, and your audience gets bored. I think it's putting a new twist on listening to other people's shows that you look up to or you aspire to be, or shows that you like. What are they doing? What types of questions are they asking that you can implement on your show to keep people hooked and intrigued to come back every week?
I think you might have answered the third question.
Oh, I jumped ahead. What do you think is the most important reason why your podcast has grown to over 10K downloads each month? That is a good one.
Yeah, well, I mean, to go off what you said is the consistency, like what can your listeners expect every month? And then also becoming really good at driving the narrative of a conversation and like knowing when to get in, when to get out, like when to ask the right question, when to bookmark something in your head, because maybe the audience was thinking like, oh, I want to hear more on that, or I'm not quite sure what that was, to go back and ask it at the right time, but then also to let the guests do the talking, let them tell the story, let them shine. And then, also like blend your personality a little bit towards like catering how the conversation goes without getting too far away from how you actually are as a person. But then the other thing I would say is just like consistent authenticity and just trying to be who you really want to be on the episode. And I heard this from Joe Rogan, but it stands true. And his obviously is the biggest podcast in the entire world, but like he is interviewing people that he is genuinely interested in talking to, because you get the actual real time Joe being genuinely interested in hearing what the other person has to say, and you can feel that through the microphone as opposed to being like, oh, what would my audience want to hear? It's like, no, your audience wants to hear you excited and you jacked up about talking about somebody that makes you potentially better at your thing that can help them become better at their thing. So that's the authenticity, I think, and the consistency.
Your personality comes out too in the questions you ask and the reaction to their answers. I think staying curious is the number one thing. Is like for us, we are just naturally curious about how people reach a certain level of success and like how can we learn from them, skip mistakes that they've made, but also maybe follow in their footsteps a little bit. So I think another thing we don't want to forget to mention is we built our podcast around a social media platform. We are heavily involved in Instagram. We've also posted every single day for 4 years, just as we've posted every single week for the podcast. And we tease our episodes. We do certain reels and highlight clips about the previous week's episode. We talk about the specific strategies that real estate investors use and put them in different types of posts. But for that, you're kind of hitting not every single person listens to podcasts. Not everybody even knows what podcasts are, believe it or not. No, that's crazy. Nowadays, most people do, but we're grabbing more people from Instagram and converting them over to podcast listeners by showing up every single day. Maybe we have a funny meme that goes out about real estate and people are like, oh, these guys are funny. Click the link in our bio and they realize we have a successful podcast that has over 10,000 downloads per week, but almost 200 5-star reviews every month.
$10,000 a month.
Sorry, not week. We'll be there.
Yeah.
I don't want to jump ahead there, but the importance is staying consistent on social media as well and showing your face. There's a lot of people that, post things about numbers and they type out tweets, but showing your face, showing your personality, letting, people a window into who you guys are, has been key for us.
Cool.
So number 4, how's your relationship with podcasting and outlook changed as you've moved from starting off and then moving into taking off and then where we are now? So I guess it's like the evolution of the show.
Well, we sucked in the beginning. And I think that that's so common for anybody doing anything is just, we didn't even really know we sucked. We just listen to ourselves now and can realize the pauses and the ums and the just the not the flow of the episode is not what we want it to be. But we would have never gotten to the stage we are now unless we just pushed through and just continued to do it and just did it with as much confidence as we had at that time. So, I mean, the outlook is I feel like I'm more comfortable in rooms talking to anybody. I have something that I can share that it may not be a benefit to everyone, but I know I'm at least proud of it. And I think that shines through. I feel like our sales experience has gone up because of the psychology of listening to people, like truly listening to what they want to say and how they want to portray it. And just the overall like communication skills.
Yeah, I think the evolution of starting day one was imposter syndrome. Corey alluded to this earlier. It's like, hey, do you want to start a podcast, talk about real estate investing? Yeah, definitely. If you're doing it, I'm in. But dude,
what are we going to talk about?
Yeah, we don't have any real estate. So that was a big one for us. It was like, we knew we had a little bit of a leg up between people in our age bracket, knowing how much money we had saved, how much money we had invested in stocks and things, but to know to get not, and then we're now into a new world where we are rookies trying to talk about something that we've really not totally dove in on, and that was real estate investing. And that, as Corey mentioned before, is like, that's why we brought other people on the show who were super successful so we could learn from them. But then we gravitated towards their level and we had them show us the ropes. And so confidence came with, the evolution really came from, we became real estate investors while becoming podcasters. We bought our first deal, then we bought our second deal, then we got into large multifamily properties, and like the different avenues and strategies we got to explore over the last 4 years. I don't think we would have done those, just he and I ourselves, without having windows open and doors open from other investors that have been successful. And we thought that their strategy was sexy. We wanted to try it. And we're finding out what we don't like, but we're also finding out what we really do like. And as I mentioned, we've created a lot of strategic partnerships that we would have never even thought possible. They wouldn't have been possible without the podcast. No. So that was the next iteration. It was like Corey and I starting out, learning podcasting, and then becoming real estate investors. But now we're getting more seasoned as we come along. And the podcast has changed as well. We were very cartoony in the beginning, and it was more like a backyard podcast. And now we really take it serious. It's like it's our digital resume in a way. It's like, when people think of Corey and Ryan, are they going to think of a professional podcast that's has amazing guests, or is it just going to be something they do, once or twice a month, that if they're just shooting the shit with themselves and like talking about their journey? When you have big name guests, people that have been like honestly celebrity stuff like these days in the game, we had one gentleman on, Tariq El Musa. A lot of people know him from Flip or Flop. He's an HGTV guy, but he's like an actual celebrity. And people, it's crazy what social media does. People see that you have a celeb on your show and like, whoa, these guys like made it. And for us, it was having guys like him, but also the people, as I mentioned, that we read their books. We're like, are we really having this conversation? Like, people have to pay big bucks to get in rooms with these guys, but they want to come on our podcast because we have a community built and they want to get their, I guess, our community's eyes on their products or their kind of mesh networks. I forget what the word is, like cross-pollinate. Yep. We talk about. But it's been a ride. I don't think we're at the pinnacle yet, and we're still learning every day. I think the next iteration is kind of learning how to use ads and strategically weave those in. But like, how do you figure out the exact dollar amount to put in, and when do you push it into your podcast? How are you changing the dynamic of the questions you're asking? Do you maybe do a shorter show? We had some gentleman that we talked to today. It does a 7-minute segment every week. We do 40 minutes to an hour. Consolidating a show into 7 minutes is crazy to me, but his downloads are through the roof because people have very short attention spans. So there's things that, as you progress through this journey, you can learn, and everybody does it a different way. But building relationships with people on the podcast side has helped us elevate to their level, and we wouldn't have been able to do it ourselves without building relationships and asking for help. I think you can't be afraid to ask. Any more on that one?
Nope.
No. Okay, so the last question is, what advice would you give to a podcaster who loves doing it but is currently struggling to grow and and can't seem to figure out how to reach their goals, both tactically and mentally?
Well, I mean, first of all, you got to figure out if you really, really enjoy it or love it or and want to do it. Because if you don't, you might just be creating a new job for yourself. But I would say that you've already mentioned staying consistent, but the other thing is to parlay your social media platform or some sort of ways to touch other people into your podcast is another good tactic. I would say what's the question's more about, like, if people are struggling, what's the best way to.
Yeah, what improvements and changes have we made over time that's helped us to kind of skyrocket in growth?
I would say that learning what other great podcasts, what makes up another great podcast. So take a top 5 list of podcasts and listen to the way that they speak, what they listen to, the types of questions they ask, and then put your own organic and unique spin on it. That would be, some advice I have. But then also another thing is really, really study the people that you have coming on your show. Like, understand who they are and maybe like what would help really benefit them when they come on your show. Because if you can provide value to the people that are coming on your show, you're going to feel this like spark of energy, but because they know that they can really get value by sharing their story on your show. And it's kind of a win-win situation. So if you dive deep into like what you know about maybe their past or their history, and ask the real questions that they might not have heard on the dozens of other podcasts, you have to stand out in some way. And I think that's a good way to do it.
Yeah, I think I don't want to forget to talk about this, but like in the beginning, as we were doing this, we had to pitch ourselves we had to pitch other people for them to come on our show. So we had to explain what our show was about and say, hey, we are inspired by what you're doing. We love your story. We see what you're doing on social media. We've read your book. Hey, here's our podcast. Here's our demographic. Here's what we're looking to do. We want to provide actionable advice to young aspiring entrepreneurs and real estate investors. Would you mind coming on our show and teaching what you teach? Most of these people are teachers and coaches, and they want to give back. So once we sent this out to a bunch of people. Corey mentioned, once we had one big name on the show, it's funny, we could reference that episode and reference that person to the next and say, hey, we had Chad Carson on the show. And they're like, oh, wow, if he's willing to go on the show, these guys must be good. Let me give them a shot. And then it kind of just trickled down as a domino effect. So the bigger names we could get, it just kind of pushed out our web a little bit, and we were able to get higher quality guests over time. And then it really solidifies you as I mentioned, like when people see these people that they're reading books about on your show, they're like, whoa, these guys built a network. Like, they know what they're talking about. No way so-and-so is going to come on the show and share their story with these guys unless they're good. They're not going to waste their time. What we've realized is how important people's time is and how valuable it is. Real estate investors that make, hundreds of thousands every year, why are they going to spend an hour with us when they could go speak at a conference and make 10, 20 grand? So with that comes a lot of tactical things we've added along the way. Every time before an episode, we send a guest guide out to the guests saying, hey, here's the flow of the show. Here's the outline. Here's some of the questions we're going to ask. If there's anything you'd like us to weave in organically, please let us know what that is ahead of time, and we'll weave that in through the show. Then pre-recording, we go through the outline briefly again, just say, hey, you have any questions, anything new happening in your world that you want us to weave in now, that, maybe they wrote a book, maybe they have an offering that they want to give to our listeners. So we go that route. Then after the show, we also send them a thank you and saying, hey, your episode's live now on YouTube, on all podcast platforms. And we even have a little link in there to ask them for a review, because we all know that the more reviews you get, the higher valued your show is in the algorithm, and it gets pushed to the top. And so obviously you want as many 5 stars as possible. So we've been trying to find ways to get people to leave reviews. Even if they say they're going to do it, it's very hard to get someone to actually do it, even though it takes 2 minutes. But those are some of the tactics we've used to kind of show that we are legitimate. We have email addresses that are based around our podcast. It's a professional business email. We're not sending an email to a very high net worth individual that runs multiple businesses from our Gmail. We're sending it from our business and our podcast email with a signature with our head, or a headshot on it, a links to our website. So it's super professional, and it links to all of our portfolio and things that we've done, so they can go see, whoa, these guys are legitimate. They know what they're talking about, but they have a resume to back it up. And the last thing I'll say is the show notes are very important. A lot of people, we are super strategic about our titles of the show, of the description for the show, to get people to actually tell a little summary about what's in the show, but not not super long where it's a book where you're like, okay, I know everything about this person by reading the show notes, a little teaser. And then we also have links within the show notes to previous guests that were on the show. So that way they can click those links. It links to that person's episode so people can listen. So there's a lot of different tactics there that we just gave. I think there's always room for improvement and growth. I think the next stage for us, or the last stage here to become really, really big, is to figure a way to use ads and continue to have people stay on your show. It's interesting. We found a lot of people, they come to the show, they try out a couple episodes, but how do you keep them in and keep them involved? That's when they migrate towards our Instagram, and we work via DM and like build relationships with them that way. People love to be able to talk to the hosts that they listen to every day in the car. They feel like they know you. So if you can give them a platform to do that, whether it be a website, a newsletter, or a social media platform, I would highly recommend that. Otherwise, there's no way for them to reach you, and they could easily just go away. There's no relationship there.
Totally.
So I think that about does it. We, as you know, Corey and I mentioned in the beginning here, we're averaging roughly 10,000 downloads a month. It fluctuates. Some much higher. Sometimes it goes a little bit lower, but it's a work in progress. This is something that is evolved more so from a passion project to a legitimate business, and it funnels a lot of things into what we do on a weekly and daily basis in the real estate investing world. So we would not be here today without the podcast. We are not going to stop the podcast, and we just know it's a cornerstone for us, and we're excited to share our story with everybody else.
Thanks for tuning in this week to the Weekly Juice Podcast. If you liked what you heard, please leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, subscribe, and share with friends. The more ratings we get, the more ears we'll get on our show, and in turn, we'll be able to provide you with more high-quality guests. You can also find us on Instagram at Weekly Juice Pod, where we post daily tips and tricks and document our own journey towards financial freedom. Make sure to tune in every Wednesday to get your weekly juice.